It's 1886. We've got a Benz Patent Motorwagen replica, and we're off to Hammersmith Farm.
Let's do it. Actually, this is quite pleasant to drive, you know? You know, it's so funny. When you're a kid, you think, oh God, the speed limit used to be 40 miles an hour. How horrible it must have been. People must have been bored to death. But you realize it's really the capability of the machine. And this feels about the right speed with this thing. You
It's a fast walk.
Yeah, you don't really want to go 25 miles an hour in this thing.
25 miles per hour in this would probably be something like 400 miles per hour in any new car today.
Oh, that's true. And you have to realize, back in the day, most people never went 30 miles from their house in their whole life.
Yeah, it's absolutely extraordinary. The mobility, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, as I'm sure you do, your first bike, all of a sudden it's freedom. You could ride through the neighborhood, it was absolutely astonishing. And this is the kind of freedom of mobility that people could only imagine before. The fact that you didn't have to, yes, you had to stop for kerosene and water, but you didn't have to stop to feed your horse. You didn't have to worry about your horse getting tired, and you could go as long as you wanted to.
And the thing I love about it is a Edwardian scientific instrument.
Yes.
I mean, everybody talks about steampunk, but this is really what steampunk is about. Not using electricity, or, well, you've got electricity in the wires, certainly, for the spark. But I mean, it's just, is it Victorian or Edwardian? I used to be Victorian.
This is actually Victorian.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So it's, again, thinking about the pace of development back then and the wonders of science. Science is giving you something new every day. And this is a great property to enjoy this on as well.
And we should explain, obviously, there was only one of these, and it's the Daimler-Benz Museum in Stuttgart, Germany. This is a replica. These were quite popular in the 80s. I think, again, was it John Bentley?
Yes.
They built a number of these, and most were bought by Mercedes dealers for the 100th anniversary back in 1886, and they would have it in the dealership and people would come and look at it. And it truly is an exact copy. Other than the battery, which is a modern battery, there's nothing about this that's new. It's not like it has modern gears or ball bearings. It's exactly the way they were built. And this is a true, when we think of replica, we think of something with a Volkswagen engine and it kind of looks like it. But
replica in the truest sense of the word. And not in any way or shape a resto mod.
Right.
And for the property that we're on, Hammersmith Farm, it's absolutely perfect because this farm, the main house, was built in 1887.
Wow.
So contemporary with this vehicle.
Well, they did before Netflix, you know, they invented stuff. They didn't just sit home and watch TV. You know,
And again, I know that you appreciate this so much, as do I. A period of time when people's imaginations just absolutely ran wild. Nobody told people that you couldn't do something, so they gave it a try.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because when I was a kid, I used to thought life must have been horrible before television. What did people do at night? But then once I got into cars and motorcycles, I would be in the garage and go, oh my God, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. And I would go to bed and I'd wake up all excited about what I was going to do the next day. Yeah,
exactly.
You know, so it's
every day a new discovery and things that literally change the world.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know if back in 1886 they can imagine the impact that the motor vehicle would have on the world in the next century, but just the fact that these ideas are being born and being developed for commercial use.
And of course there were steam vehicles were fairly common, you know, so it's just the internal combustion engine is what was new. And at the time, a lot of people didn't like because as it's noisy, a steam engine was quiet, didn't frighten the animals, you know, so this was seen as, and you really couldn't get fuel because with a steam car, all you needed was wood or coal, something to heat water.
And that was the another one of the great accomplishments of Bertha Benz's trip.
Yeah.
The fact that she had to stop at chemist shops to get the Legroin oil, like the kerosene that she used to power the car. So she had to do it on her own without having a gas gauge. I mean, you know, she stopped where she stopped.
Right.
Every time they stopped, they had to get water. And she made the trip with her 2 teenage sons. I can't imagine where the second one sat.
Yeah.
You must have simply walked beside the vehicle.
There is no cooling system in this. You just fill it with water.
Correct.
And when the water evaporates, you put more water in. So
you don't want to run out of water no matter what you do.
Germany in the winter was the perfect place. A freezing cold day, because you could drive it forever.
And only took her 11 hours for her trip, 102 kilometers.
And you really couldn't stop because the water would freeze.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Donald. My oldest boy. Thanks, Donald. Goodbye.
Here's the lucky penny.
There you go, I'll take it. Very nice. What do we have here? 280S, and why is this here?
Well, Jay, this is a 1969 Mercedes 280 SL, and it's quite a contrast to our 1886 Benz Patent Motorwagen. However, there's a good reason to be here with this particular type of car, because Jackie Bouvier, later Jackie Kennedy, who grew up here at Hammersmith Farm, this place was built for the great-great-grandfather of her stepfather, Auchincloss. She kept a 230 SL, the predecessor of this car, here at Hammersmith Farm.
You know, it's funny, as a kid, I never appreciated these because this was a grown-up sports car. You know, as a kid, you liked the raw power of the Corvette, or even the Thunderbird, or even the previous 300 SL, because it had the fuel-injected engine on slanted off to the side. It won races. Sterling Moss drove one. This, to me, as a young man, seemed like really just a four-seater Mercedes-Benz sedan, but with two seats. I never appreciated it as a young person for what it was, because it's not truly a sports car, is it? It's more a luxury grand touring car.
It is and it isn't, and I think that's the great gift of the Pagoda, so-called, for the shape of the hardtop of these cars, SLs. Because remember, of course, as you said, Mercedes offered the 300 SL in the 1950s, the big six-cylinder car, and they also offered the smaller 190 SL with a four-cylinder engine and carburetors. The 230 SL, when it was introduced in 1964, was actually the middle between the two, the 300 and the 190. And people often also forget that the 230 SL also had a pretty good competition history. It was rallied quite successfully when it was new, and so it still retained the sporting heritage of Mercedes-Benz in a big way. And by the time you get to the late 1960s with these 280 SLs, they're really smooth but capable as well. I mean, they're cars that deliver surprising performance when you push them.
Yeah, but you know, we live in America, home of the V8, and four-cylinder was the norm in Europe. The six-cylinder was their V8, was their big block.
Right.
And this was a big motor, and Mercedes was starting to see the writing on the wall with, you can't sell a premium car with a $10,000 price tag with a six-cylinder engine, at least not in America, you know.
Absolutely. This was one of the last gasps of truly selling a German product here in the U.S. I remember quite famously the development engineer, Rudolf Uhlenhaut, when someone complained about how expensive an SL was and it didn't have power windows.
Right.
And he said, if you can't reach across the car and roll up your own windows, you do not need to be driving a Mercedes.
Right, right.
And so, you know, that was the attitude.
Right.
It did change, but nonetheless, this is a car, these SLs have, to me, the essence of Mercedes power and strength, and yet in a very elegant setting, perfect for Newport and Hammersmith Farm.
It's one of the few sports cars where you don't get, ow, my hair, you know, because it's a comfortable, it's really just a two-seater Mercedes. It's everything Mercedes is, but with two seats and a top that goes down. And you actually had a metal top you had to take off by hand. They used to sell you a winch that you would have in your, you know, now everything is power. And to think of this, this would be Spartan by today's standards, but this was a luxury car. It had roll-up windows and air conditioning in a two-seater open car, which was unheard of. Really.
I always thought that the ultimate in luxury when I was a kid was an air-conditioned convertible.
Right.
And I had a 230 when I graduated college, and I remember once making the mistake of taking the hardtop off by myself.
Oh yeah, you don't.
There was this wonderful moment where I'm balanced over the car with this really big hardtop, and I thought at any moment this could all go really bad. I never did that again.
And no college kid today could afford a 230 or a 280 SL. I mean, back then it was a used car, wasn't it? You could get it for a reasonable price.
It was a used car, it wasn't very expensive, and without betraying my age completely, I had the 230 SL for a few years after college, decided I didn't want to have a college student loan anymore, so I sold my 230 SL, paid off my college loan, and with what was left over, bought a 73 Alfa Romeo Spider.
Wow.
Don't try that today, kids.
No, you won't do that. But
let's take this for a spin.
We'll do it. Let's do it. And of course, being Mercedes, egress is very easy. It's not like a sports car where you have to jam yourself in, you know. The doors open wide. There's all kinds of room. I mean, it's just a beautiful touring car. And I used to work at Foreign Motors of Boston, which was a Mercedes deal. Well, I remember that sound. And I remember this gearbox. I used to love this gearbox because it was so different from anything in America. And a white steering wheel. First car ever had a white steering wheel that I saw.
Amazing. Let's head up to the house.
Let's do it.
This 280 SL is, you have to admit, the absolute perfect car for Hammersmith Farm, especially on a beautiful summer day like this.
Yeah, and these are the actual...
the garages.
Garages, or were they stables back in the day?
These are garages. The stables were further up the road.
Oh, okay.
They actually built these as garages as the property grew. And the astonishing thing about this property, of course, is its amazing setting here on Newport Harbor, right next to Fort Adams. And it's a place that is just absolutely steeped in history, in active history. An active farm since 1640.
Wow.
And still an active farm today.
Now that lighthouse, does that belong to the government, or does that belong to this property?
That lighthouse belongs to the property.
Right.
And is, again, a remnant of the time when the land grant was first given. There was always a lighthouse there to watch the harbor and the ships. Now, of course, it's a lovely guest house on the property, used by a very active and large family.
But not used as a lighthouse anymore.
Not used as a lighthouse for the government, no.
It's amazing how big this property is.
It's still 60 acres from the original 97 acres of the land grant.
Wow.
Back in the 17th century. And it's extraordinary when you have a piece of property that's been held together like this. It's really quite magical. And again, I don't know the specific combination of sort of down-to-earth elegance that a car like this has. This is perfect for this place.
Well, you know, this car just sort of exudes quality, especially compared to a lot of contemporary cars built back in the period. You know, all the screw heads are exactly aligned, and, you know, just all those kind of things that sort of make it. Is that the main house back there?
That's the main house there. It is believed that the name Hammersmith came from the town in Britain, birthplace of William Brenton, a 17th century governor of Rhode Island who established a farm on the site in 1640. In continuous farm use since that time, what once was called Hammersmith Island sits on a commanding site overlooking all of Newport Harbor. And this site proved irresistible to John Winthrop Auchincloss, a New York businessman who commissioned Robert Henderson Robertson to build his summer house on the property. Robertson was born in 1849 in Philadelphia and had a long career designing homes, churches, and commercial buildings, mostly in New York City. His work covered a variety of styles, but was best known for dramatic Romanesque revival structures with heavily figured stonework. Robertson's residential work in Newport include Hammersmith Farm and the Charles H. Baldwin House on Bellevue Avenue, both examples of the transitional Queen Anne revival and shingle style. The Baldwin House and Hammersmith share many attributes, but Robertson gave Auchincloss's seaside home a much more casual feel than that of its in-town sibling. U.D. Auchincloss, John W.'s great-grandson, was born in Newport at Hammersmith and spent summers here with his family and children, including stepdaughters Lee and Jackie Bouvier, daughters of Janet Lee Bouvier, his third wife. Jackie married John F. Kennedy in Newport in 1953, and the reception was held at Hammersmith Farm. When Kennedy was elected president, Hammersmith became an unofficial summer White House, where he signed into law the act creating the Peace Corps in 1961. Janet Lee Auchincloss remained at Hammersmith after her husband's death in 1976, however the main house was sold out of the family in 1977. Hammersmith Farm was purchased by the current owners in 1999, who embarked on an extensive and detailed restoration of the home which had become greatly deteriorated.
This work extended to the grounds as well, with the original landscaping and garden plans being restored, as was the house, to their 1888 appearance. The result is truly remarkable. Hammersmith Farm is a one-of-a-kind blend of 17th century farming history combined with Gilded Age summers, a bit of the American Camelot story, and superb restoration and conservation.
Now that's not part of the property.
This is not part of the property, no. This is an absolutely astonishing vista here.
I know, look at that. Well, this house was here before the bridge, wasn't it?
Exactly. And you can just imagine the effect that the Pell Bridge made 50 years ago when it appeared there on the horizon. I understand actually there's a story that the Navy wasn't crazy about building a bridge across here because Newport, of course, remains an important naval base. The Navy War College is here, and the naval presence in Newport has been a part of Newport history for over a century.
Yeah.
And the SL, especially the 280, is such a statement of German style and presence, but also very American.
Right.
Over half of the 280s built were sold in America.
All right, I would guess so, because the climate, I mean, Germany, obviously, you've got, what, 4 months of summer, maybe, you know.
Yeah, this is the place to enjoy an SL convertible, and you can just imagine how much Jackie Bouvier enjoyed hers here in Newport.
I wonder where that car is now. It must be with a collector, I would imagine.
That car is actually here in town, and actually is available.
You mean it's for sale?
It is.
Wow.
It's unfortunately not in very good condition. It's much like Hammersmith Farm was before the present owners purchased it and restored it to this spectacular condition.
You think that would be a collectible worth restoring? Was she the first owner of it?
As far as I know, she was the first owner of the car.
Wow.
It's had a lot of interventions, so there's not very much original about the car anymore at this point, unfortunately. But it still certainly serves as a historical artifact, that's for sure. Yeah.
One of the first cars, too, without vent windows. You notice that?
Yes. Mercedes was very proud of their ventilation system, these wonderful metal vents and the selectable controls that the driver and the passenger could select their own ventilation
and these
temperature.
were heavy rubber, as I remember.
Exactly.
These feel a little bit different.
These are the replacement ones, which you have to put in these days because the originals have a tendency to crack with age and stiffen. So they put the replacements in, and they serve a good purpose. This is an example that's been restored to a very high level by a German specialist who only does these Pagoda Mercedes cars. And you can tell in all the details the wonderful wood trim that is finished in the correct satin finish rather than a gloss finish.
Yeah, most people do it with the gloss, which I thought was a factory option, but it wasn't, was it?
No, it wasn't. You did have the choice of 3 different types of wood in the 280 SL, and so you see some variations that way. But again, like any luxury object, like Hammersmith Farm itself, it takes a lot of maintenance to keep a car like this up, realizing that you're in a roadster with an open roadster with wood trim on the inside.
Right.
It's like maintaining a boat, you know, constant maintenance. Wood, leather, chrome, you know, all the basic elements of quality are here present in this car. And you can just imagine Jackie Bouvier driving up from a nice trip on the boat and driving her 230 SL into one of these garages.
What are you looking at here, Donald? 1938?
A 1938 Packard 12 Landaulet by Rolston of New York.
Yeah. This was just about the end of Packard for the coach-built era. The 20s, the 30s, those are the glory years. The 40s were okay. The 50s got desperate, and because by the mid-50s they were out of business. But this was the golden era when you ordered a chassis, and then you picked the bodybuilder, like a man would pick a tailor for the material he bought, or a woman for the dress that she wanted, and they would design it for you. And this is a half convertible, I guess people would call it.
Well, it's sort of a quarter convertible. It's a Landaulet so that the rear quarter panels and roof drop down.
Right, just this tan part's the only part that drops down.
Exactly. So that the lucky passenger, the owner of this car, could choose to be seen or not seen. And in this case, It's a very interesting passenger indeed in that back compartment because it's none other than Doris Duke, who ordered this car at the age of 25. She was the richest woman in America at 25 years old.
Wow.
She ordered this Packard, and it's strange to think today of a rich young woman ordering what looks like a very, very formal car.
Right.
But she was always someone who was very assured of her own style, something that she inherited from her mother, Nanaline Inman Holt Duke, and something that served her for the rest of her life. She was very, very, very much a Newport fixture, and in fact was so important in Newport history because she started preservation in Newport. And she was the one who came up with the idea to buy and renovate the 18th century homes in Newport, which had fallen completely into neglect, and she brought them back to renovate and then rent to new people to live in them to save them for posterity.
Right.
So she was a very, very important figure in Newport history, and she used this car to commute between New York and Newport.
And this is one of the, you know, I consider this more than equal to the Rolls-Royce of the period. Rolls-Royce gets all the credit. Packard, this was the quietest V12. Duesenbergs were nice, they were fast, but they were noisy. This was dead silent. I remember the first generation had the aluminum heads, and that didn't work out quite so well. Then they went back to the cast iron. This is a bulletproof motor. If you wanted to redo one of these motors today, it would cost you between $50,000 and $80,000 because they're that well made. But you don't really need to because they, once they're put together, they, unless you modified it in some horrible way, they pretty much run forever. Just a beautiful, beautiful piece. And something that's really cool, by 1939, this cormorant, which was the symbol, was also the radio antenna. You ever seen one of those?
Yes.
And it had, from the wings back, you had these, well, like maybe 5 or 6 antennas coming back with a bit of a...
The little finial at the end.
At the end, yeah. And that was your radio antenna, which was really the coolest option ever. These were fast, they were comfortable, they were powerful. I mean, it looks like a big plodding car, but it's not. It was 175 horsepower, which was
substantial for the 1930s.
Cutting edge back in the day. The only engine bigger was the Duesenberg with 265. Maybe the 16 Cadillac was close with 180, but this was, you know, flashy people bought a Duesenberg. Musicians, rock stars bought Cadillacs.
Exactly.
Quiet money. This was always old money, and they were always black or dark gray or blue. Very rarely did you see a loud Packard with yellows in the, you know, especially in this era.
Exactly, and a car like this also, you mentioned the radio. This car is equipped with a radio. I'm not quite sure where the antenna is, probably mounted underneath one of the running boards.
Now, where the antenna is in here.
In the roof panel.
Well, since this is not metal, this is a fabric. What do they call this? It's like a leatherette, and you've got the antenna within here.
And this car took her from her home in New Jersey to her home here, Rough Point in Newport. Let's take a look inside this car. It's absolutely astonishing. And for the chauffeur, we were talking about the wonderful steering wheel in the 280 SL. Look at that absolute magnificent Bakelite wheel.
This is an era before power steering, before power well, you did have a power brake of the vacuum, but everything was nicely balanced and nicely weighted. You needed a big wheel to get that leverage. You know, and there's like a chauffeur's wheel, so you could whip this thing around. Really cool.
Exactly. And you know, a rather complete set of instrumentation for the time as well. Although it's always interesting that they put the clock closer to your line of view than the gas gauge and the oil pressure.
That's because the gas gauge moved faster than the clock.
So you could always be sure of what's happening.
Right.
And then, of course, back in the business end of the car, the young Miss Duke enjoyed all of the modern conveniences. You see, there's a speaker there for her to speak to the chauffeur, and her own radio set.
Well, you had your own clock and own speedometer, as well as all sorts of gadgets here and jump seats.
As you said, the speedometer, and apparently it was also fitted with a drinks cabinet.
Right.
And of course, that was after the repeal of Prohibition, so this was completely legal. A very comfortable place for a nice drive up. So, Jay, here we have it at Hammersmith Farm, an absolute icon of Newport history. 3 amazing cars telling the story of 3 astonishing women, and it continues here today at Hammersmith Farm because the current mistress of this wonderful place also drives an interesting vehicle, a 1934 Ford pickup truck.
Which was my very first car, which brings us full circle. There you go right there.
Absolutely. Another great Newport story cars, houses, people. A very comfortable place for a nice drive up. Yeah, we won't show that.
Okay, yeah.